All right, we're going to go ahead and start with the webinar. My name is Rhonda Dean, and we're doing a recorded webinar for the After Action Report and Reimbursement Request for National Crime Victims' Rights Week. It's been a bit of a crazy spring. All of you have been really great with your questions and being very creative in how you were going to change things on the fly. So we appreciate all the communication that's gone back and forth. But what this webinar is going to tell you is how to complete your paperwork to get reimbursed. So the after action report, I'm going to refer as the AAR throughout most of this presentation. Probably should introduce myself. Sorry, my name is Rhonda Dean. I am the project director, or the person who will be processing and looking at all your after action reports and then sending them on to Daisy for reimbursement. So that's who I am. I am currently living in Iowa. We have experienced not quite as hard as other parts of the country, but unfortunately we surpassed 500 deaths today. So that makes me sad, and I'm hoping we're on the downward end of this, but so far it doesn't look like that in our state, even though it's wide open again. So our agenda today is we're going to just do some general information, and then we're going to go through each section of the AAR, and that will help you know then make sure that you're getting all of the information reported on your grant so that you can get reimbursed super timely here. So for information, these are your contact people for the grant. Daisy is executive director of NAVA. Myself, there's my email. And then Ann Seymour was our project consultant. She helped you all with your ideas, how to reach people and those types of things. And then Emily is our contact at OBC. She's our grant manager. So that's our contact information. One of the questions that's been coming up to me in the last few weeks has been, do we anticipate another extension for the CAP grant? And right away, I'll just tell you that is not, we're not expecting that. The grant will be closed out on July 31st. So I must have your AARs completed to me by Friday, July 31st. Reimbursement payments typically just take a few days. Again, I look through it and then I send them to Daisy. I send them every Friday. If we're starting to get more and more in, I might do that twice a week. But at this point, because I think folks are really just getting started on holding an event, probably mostly in June. So yeah, everything has to be to me by July 31st. Just keep it simple. You don't have to tell me every single thing that happened that wasn't necessarily CAP funded. And everything is described or reported in the narrative or statistical section of the AAR, and it must be directly linked to items and expenses listed in section 4, the reimbursement request of the report. And we're going to get through each of those sections. You should have received an after action report form in your grant award packet. If you did not receive that, please email me and let me know and I can resend it to you. Or it is also on the CAP grant website. You can pull it from there too. Section 1 is your organizational information. This is super important because this is how you're going to get reimbursed from a check. So this information has to be in here and it has to be accurate, please. So we want subgrantee agency. Very likely the check will be made out to that unless I see something that you might provide in the space entitled special instructions. And if you put different information in there or where the check should be made out to, please put that there and we will make sure that's taken care of. And only one reimbursement check will be issued for each subgrantee project. We cannot issue checks to your vendors. We cannot issue checks to individual people. And then please note that the check payee line is limited to 41 characters. On section 2, this is where you're going to talk about your project. You're going to talk about in section 2A what were the dates that you held your project? Please do not include dates for planning or preparation. This is only dates where the awareness event was held, or if you had an in-person event, which most people haven't yet due to COVID-19, but if you had an in-person event and you had multiple planning meetings, you wouldn't put those dates in there. You just want the specific date of the project and when it was held. In section 2B, you're going to give us a brief description of the activities that you would like reimbursed for with these funds. So if you had some local funds for one part of it and CAP grant funds for another part of it, we don't necessarily want all of the information regarding the other funds. We only want the information regarding the funds used to for Crime Victims' Rights Week. So if it was CAP related or used CAP funds to pay for it, that's what we want you to report on. So one of the really pieces that's important on this slide is, for example, it's better to describe an event as a recognition ceremony rather than an awards luncheon, even if the food was donated and federal funds were not used to provide the food. Anytime you say awards luncheon and it's related to the CAP money or actually any federal money, it's going to throw up a red flag. So be careful with your wording and those types of things. And then on section 2C, you're going to talk about if there were any sub-grant activities that were not implemented. And there's only 100 words here. So you're going to have to be very concise. But let's say you had planned an event that was in person and COVID hit, and now you have to do a virtual event. Well, you're still holding that event. So you wouldn't necessarily put anything here. You're just doing it in a different way. But let's say you had planned an event and COVID hit and you're not doing a virtual event. You've decided that you're going to get reimbursed only for those things that you paid for before COVID hit. And then you canceled all of your events, or all of your events were canceled. We would want to know why that, and put why that was not implemented, or why that event wasn't going to happen in section 2C. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's important that you complete that for us. Section 3, public awareness activities and materials. These are, what did you do? So list the date of either publicly or virtually attended events, specifically that were funded by the CAP subgrant. And I put virtually on here because a lot of our materials at this for the AAR talk about in-person events only. They don't necessarily talk about advertising or any of those kind of things. So we want to make sure that people understand that virtual also is included this year in those events. So don't include planning dates again, just dates of the actual implementation of the event. And this says there are events at which people physically attend in person or they attend a virtual event. Do not list your media or advertising campaigns here. These would just be some sort of awareness event that you held that draw people for your Crime Victims Awareness Week. The next part, section 3B, is for any speakers that you might have. So any speakers who traveled to an event, or if you were reimbursing speakers that attended a virtual event, please give us that information in section 3B. But also remember that you have to pay attention to the federal rates for travel costs and for speaker fees. And those are on gsa.gov/per diem. We cannot reimburse anyone for costs that are over what that per diem rate is. Again, if you have any questions on any of this while you're completing it, don't hesitate to give me an email, and I try to get back to you as soon as I can. If you have any other questions and it's an emergency and I'm not available, you can always try to email Daisy or Ann as well. Section 3C, these are your mass media or public service announcements. So in number one, yes. Number one, you're going to talk about radio, television, newspapers, those types of things. So enter the number of types produced of those things. And in the number of times run column, enter the total number of times the advertisement appeared. Newspapers and magazines may be print and or digital editions. Do not use the number of copies, views, exposures, impressions, or circulation figures. So if City of El Paso did a print campaign for their Crime Victims' Rights Week, and their circulation is 22,000 people, you cannot use that number. We don't want that number. We want the number of times run. And this is a pretty good example down below. If you produce 3 different radio public service announcements, 2 30-second PSAs, and 1 60-second PSA, you enter 3 in the number of types produced. If each of these 3 PSAs ran 10 times during Crime Victims' Rights Week, enter 30 in the number of times run column. And then for the other column, don't list items here that are already listed in 3I. So if I did a bookmark campaign at my library, maybe I did children's coloring books, those do not go in mass media other, those go down in 3I, and you can see what all of those are there, what we see as our common items that you might print for giveaways. Other mass media would include social media, so you would record those numbers there. And then enter the number of websites, media interviews, press releases, and other media contacts only if they directly relate to the CAP project. And in 3I, printed promotional items, enter the total quantity of each different type produced and the total of what was distributed. The quantity distributed obviously cannot exceed the total quantity produced. And these are really only what the giveaways or promotional items that you used CAP funds for or purchased with CAP funds. These items are not intended to replenish an agency's supply of materials or used for extended periods of time past your National Crime Victims' Rights Week event. This was not an opportunity for you to refresh your brochures or refresh your giveaway promotional items using CAP funds for that. CAP funds are intended for the particular event that recognizes Crime Victims' Rights Week. 3J is anytime you use social media, and 3K are any other activities that you may have had during that event that weren't already listed. And section 3, if you have any questions on any of that, of course, let me know. Section 4 is a reimbursement request. This is where you're going to ask me for reimbursement for the items that you purchased for Crime Victims' Rights Week or service that you purchased for Crime Victims' Rights Week. So what is outlined on the reimbursement request for section 4 is what is the item, what was the item, how many, what was the cost, and what was the total. So this total should match your approved budget or budget modification. Obviously, it cannot go over those items. If you can list the items in the same order as they appear in your budget or in your budget modification, that's very helpful as well because I compare those and before I send it on. So how does it look? What does it look like when you do your reimbursement request? So this example here on number 3, t-shirts, they printed 200 of them. They were $7.50 a piece. That works out to $1,500. And they separated out the setup and shipping charges there. That's the correct, you can do it that way. You can also do it the way below, which is t-shirts including setup and shipping, and then give us the amount, how many, and per cost. Either one of those ways work, but it's super important that you check your math. so that each line item can be accurately calculated. The quantity times the unit cost must equal the amount, and the sum of all line item amounts must equal the total direct cost. Please explain how these expense items relate to a specific event or activity described in the narrative. The total amount requested cannot exceed the approved budget. I said that already, and it cannot exceed the budget modification amount. With our cancellations this year, we've had a lot of folks who are requesting reimbursement for less than what they were awarded. Just note, if I haven't talked to you, I should have told you. If I did talk to you, I should have told you this, but I'll just tell everybody now that if these funds are offered next year for this, and I don't know why they wouldn't be, but if they are offered, and people who either declined or spent way less this year than they would have if not for the pandemic, they can reapply next year, and there will be it won't be held against them, I guess is what I'm trying to say, if they were not able to spend their funds because of the coronavirus. Number 6 in section 4, if indirect costs are claimed, enter the indirect cost rate as shown on the subgrantee award agreement. In most cases, that's 10%, but some cases that's more than that. If that is the case, you multiply the indirect cost rate times your total direct costs and enter the amount of those indirect costs. This is really important to know that if my award was $5,000, but I spent $4,000, I didn't spend it all, and I asked for an indirect cost rate in my budget and my application, $500. So I would get $4,500 in expenses, $500 for indirect costs, taking it to $5,000. But I only spent $4,000. I can't still get that $5,000 for indirect costs. It's 10% times the total direct cost on the claim form. I hope that all makes sense. If you have any questions about that, let me know. You enter the total request. We talked about that. Do not exceed the total amount of your budget. Use the space provided for any additional calculations or explanation, and there's a space below with 150 words. Use the space, I said that. Copies of this is important. It is obviously important when you see things in PowerPoint underlined and bolded. Copies of original source documents, such as invoices, bills, receipts, or checks for each line item of $300 or more must be submitted with the AAR. Documentation of all other expenses must also be retained and submitted upon request. So if you have a line item that is more than $300, I need a receipt included in the AAR copy. If it's less than $300, you must retain that, because you, in a site visit or anything like that, we can ask for that information. So $300 or more, send me attach the invoice to your report. Less than that, keep them on file, and obviously keep your bigger ones on file too. Section 5 is talk about the type and level of activities, events that would not have been possible without National Crime Victims' Rights Week CAP funds. This is where you're going to tell us how the funds helped you be successful in your event. This could include, what we're specifically looking for is items or activities and items that relate to the year, the theme of Seek Justice, Ensure Victims' Rights, and Inspire Hope, and the logo, and all of those things. We want to make sure those were included. So let us know the impact of your project and what happened during your implementation in this section. We also, so explaining the documentation a little bit, it consists of copies of news articles that mention the Crime Victims' Rights Week activities, any press releases, programs, photographs. The photos should show the use of your colors, themes, and logos, particularly mass media ads, printed materials, and appropriate promotional giveaway items. Do not send us pictures of people attending Crime Victims' Rights Week events if the pictures do not show the use of the Crime Victims' Rights Week identifying elements. So if I'm at my event, and let's say I'm doing an online event, and I take a screenshot of an individual presenting. That's not going to tell me necessarily that it's a Crime Victims' Rights Week event. I'm going to take a picture of maybe the person who is distributing the promotional packets out and what those promotional items look like. That's what we want, pictures of people who have, I can't even talk today, who use the Crime Victims' Rights Week colors, theme, and logo in their promotional materials or printed materials. The AAR cannot exceed 10 pages. So don't just send us links to internet addresses, and do not send actual samples of your non-paper or oversized items. An easy thing to do is take pictures and then cut and paste them into a Word document, and that can be done pretty easy. Where do I send my documentation in my AAR? Well, you can email it to the CAP address. You can also email it to my address, which was in the beginning, and I'll show it again. It also can be shipped to the address listed here. Please use the space provided in section 5, telling us what documentation is being submitted if it's not attached to the AAR, and how it's coming to us. We prefer it attached, but not everybody is able to do that. Give us comments, suggestions, and feedback on this year's logo, the resource guide, the colors, the theme video, and how can we improve the CAP program? What can we do to bring the Crime Victims' Rights Week CAP project to more people, increase it. I'm not, monetarily, I'm not sure we'll be able to do that, but what we can do is increase quality. What are some things we can do to get it out there more so more people are seeing it? The AAR must be signed either manually or electronically by an authorized agency representative. And as I said before, you can email it to cap@nava.org. You can email it to Rhonda, RHONDA, @nava.org. Fax it to that number listed, or mail or ship it to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania address. When I get it, if there's anything I need additional information or clarification, I will reach out to you and ask for that. But as always, retain a copy of it for your records as well. We can't necessarily do any live questions, but you can send any of your questions to us at cap@nava.org while you're completing it, after you complete it. Whenever you have a question, don't hesitate to give us an email or a phone call with your question. Thank you very much for today. Let me get back to the beginning here, and I'll get our contact information so you guys can see it. Thank you so much, as I know this has been a really tough year with this project. Lots of folks, again, though, are super creative and were able to pull some of it off. Had to change things up a little bit, but I'm looking forward to hearing what folks are doing here in this next month. Don't forget that you have to have your AAR into me by July 31st for reimbursement. Thanks, guys, and have a great day.